Hello and welcome to this review of my Sager IncoGuard fountain pen. Now, you may have never heard of Sager, and for good reason too. They didn't last very long, and there's not much known about the company in general. What we do know about the Sager Pen Company was that it was started up in the mid-20s and dissolved by World War II, thereabouts. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to find too much information online about the company, their product line, and what they ended up doing. That said though, the pens that they ended up producing were very good pens. They actually patented and produced a new type of filling mechanism, which is more or less a pump filler. Keep in mind that this was at a time where ink sacs were pretty much the dominant form of filling up a pen. Now, unfortunately, this piston has ceased to actually function properly, so if I'm ever going to use this pen, I would usually eyedropper fill it. Even so, this pen has had a lot better days in its life. It's made out of some type of primitive plastic which is extremely brittle. I got this pen about 4.5 years ago, and at that time I was not very knowledgeable of materials and of the servicing process of this type of pen. I actually ended up cracking the threads along here, so to remedy that I sanded it down flat. Unfortunately, it still left a couple of cracks in the resin right here. You can see right here, and I believe right there as well. That little crack right here. My biggest challenge was to try to get this piston to move, but it's so seized up and I cannot figure out how to unscrew this thing, this filler thing. One attempt at servicing this pen was getting a vacuumatic tool and unscrewing this back end. Alas, that didn't work. That actually just made these threads even shallower. I wasn't too concerned because I only picked up this pen for about 10 bucks. It didn't take me long to figure out how fragile this pen was though. Taking a look at the cap itself, I mean the thickness is thinner than a hair. I could just pinch this without too much force and it would just crack. That said, the rest of the pen is pretty excellent though, especially this nib, which I'm going to get to. Having said all that, unfortunately, I don't use this pen very often. I now have this as more or less a showpiece in my collection. Let's go ahead and do a head-to-toe inspection. The top of the cap is nicely rounded right here, and it just kind of comes down to this clip, which has a lot of inscription on here. Let me read it to you. It says, Sager Sackless has a punch of a barrel, which says barrel of ink, and then underneath it, it says patented USA. It's got these two flush cap bands right here, along with 4 breather holes to prevent the cap from drawing up a vacuum. The barrel itself is red, transparent. I'm thinking it's some sort of plastic or resin of some kind. And it has this bow effect, very slight taper up to this band right up here, this gold band, and then it just tapers off very nicely right here. This is a blind cap, so you can unscrew this, and this is where the piston would be in order to fill up the pen, which in itself feels very nice actually. If this worked properly, this would be very nice to use. It's not those little flimsy things that you get on like a Parker or anything like that. There's even more inscription. It says Sager Transparo, the Sager Pen Corporation, Chicago, USA. We've got another patent date right here, which says patented September of 26. And we have, again, another barrel, and inside that barrel it says barrel of ink. In that case, that statement is true. This pen's barrel did contain all the ink. It was just literally a whole barrel full of ink. And there's even more inscription on the grip section itself. Keep in mind also that this white is just used by a China marker, so you can see it up on camera. This was never supposed to be there, but it just helps with seeing the print. Anyway, it has another patent date. It says registered USA, patents pending. IncoGuard right here. and it says SM Sager. I'm guessing that's his signature right there, and that's all there is to it right there. And lastly, the nib says Sager Transparo. It's got a line, and it says sackless, and then it's a 14-karat gold nib. You also have this interesting feed right here, which has a tube, a breather tube, right down the center. And that hole is very important for the filling mechanism of this pen. Overall, this pen is on the smaller side. They made these in regular sizes and oversize. I have yet to find this exact pen online anywhere. I have yet to find what the exact size of this pen is. It doesn't appear to be a standard size, but it also seems to be too big to be a lady size pen. Here, for example, is a Waterman Lady Patricia from 1934, and as much as it is around the same size, the thickness of these pens vary drastically. I do really like this grip section, however. It feels very nice, and it really stops your fingers from going any further. It's also got a very sharp cone inside of here, which really helps trap the ink to only flow to the nib and feed right here. The threads are a little bit rough, but they're not uncomfortable. However, the size for me is way too small for me. I mean, I couldn't write very comfortably with this as it is. You can post the pen, however, I've noticed that it attaches to the blind cap right here, so making sure that's on all the way is important. And I just give it just a little bit of a push and just a bit of a turn to keep it on there. And then the pen actually turns into a very decently sized pen. The transition from the barrel to the cap is excellent. It's very smooth transition. You don't feel this at all. Overall, if this pen actually worked well, I could write with this for days. Let's talk a little bit more about this nib. This nib is very interesting. This is actually a semi-flex italic nib. On a normal fountain pen, the tip of the nib will have a ball of iridium or some sort of hard metal welded onto it. This pen has that too, however it is cut flat. And a nib that is cut flat is called an italic nib. As a result, this nib is very smooth to write with. And the flex that it offers just adds more to it than it already has. So without further ado, let's go ahead and ink it up with the best ink in the world. I'm just kidding, we're not inking up with Bay State Blue. We're going to use Parker Quink, and I'm just going to dip the pen in the ink and do some writing with it as such. So, very nice nib to write with, and you can see in my writing little bits and hints of line variation already through here. If I go ahead and do some crossing, I'm not pushing down on the nib at all. You can see these very big contrasting lines from a cross stroke to a downstroke if I hold it at a 90-degree angle. If I hold it at a 45-degree angle, which is what most people hold it at, without doing any pressure, you can already see the thickness come out right here. Let's go ahead and do some wetness. I'm not pushing too much at all. It lays down a pretty wet line, as you see right there. And then let's go ahead and do some flexing, and it really does open up quite nicely. It's not a true, I wouldn't call it a true flex nib because it's got flex to give, but it's not, you know, I can feel that it takes a little too much effort to really push it down to open up this nib. The pen did skip, but let's do a little bit of fast writing. If I do some bits, it does skip a little bit. Okay, let's turn it upside down, see what kind of writing it does. A rather unusual kind of line. It writes sort of smoothly. I'd give it probably a 5 out of 10 on a smoothness scale, 10 being the smoothest. But you can see, you can get really good shading out of the ink that you have right here. Very light, very dry line you're getting from this. Let's see if we can lay it flat, which we can a little bit, and we get a kind of an interesting line going in here. So you can get a little bit artsy with this nib, but I wouldn't go too crazy. Okay, pros and cons times. So let's talk about the pros of this. This pen is a very unique pen. They're actually quite rare to find and get your hands on. That said, however, you do get a very good nib on here. I like the design, and I particularly like the grip section. I wish more pens had this kind of grip section on their pens. The clip I actually find very appealing. It's very rare that I actually like a certain clip, because a clip is, well, just for me, a clip does one job. And for this, I really like the inscription on here, and I like how it's not overly tight. This can be very practical in a real world sense. Now, things I don't like about the pen. The material. I really don't like how thin and fragile and brittle this material is. Very unforgiving. I think it's some primitive form of plastic. Again, we're talking about the late 1920s, maybe early 30s when this pen was made. I don't like the filling mechanism, partially because it doesn't work, but also partially due to the fact that I don't know how to service it, and it's not apparent how you can service it. The other thing I'm not particularly fond of is the transparent barrel. I understand why they did this. However, there's no pattern on here, and it just has this awkward window that lets you know how much ink is in there. So I wish this was either just completely transparent or just a solid black color, because it's kind of inconsistent with the black cap right here. It's clearly a different material. That said, do I like the pen? Absolutely. This is a really nice pen to have. Not many people own a Sager. So overall, a very excellent pen, and really interesting pen to have in my collection. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you all very much for tuning in. Go ahead and leave a like on this video if you liked it. Go ahead and subscribe if you want to see more. And coming up now is a close-up montage of this pen. Again, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.